My name is Christopher Currell, and I'm a musician and kind of technician, computer programmer, probably related to this synthesizer called the synclavier. And I'm currently talking to you from Abbey Road Institute in France, outside of Paris, and it's quite fun. So I'm giving a master class here just a little while, and today's topic is maybe a little bit unusual. So 3D and spatial audio is becoming quite popular, and I've been involved in this technology for probably 25 years and actual practical applications. I've done many types of projects, from movies to films to game, theme parks, all kinds of things having to do with spatial sound, working with Walt Disney and the theme parks and these kinds of things. Today's master class is more on the production side, all the things that maybe the engineer needs to know based on experience when they're making 3D audio environments and virtual acoustic environments. I'm a musician first, and I've played a little bit of keyboards, but mainly I'm a guitar player. I'm a programmer for synthesizers, and I engineer and produce, teach. So how I got involved in these advanced synthesizers like the Fairlight or the synclavier and these kinds of instruments, it actually started when I was kind of in my prog rock stages. The Mini Moog came out, and I thought, wow, this is really great. The sound is really big and dramatic, but I'm not a keyboard player. Wham, I'm a guitar player. So my access to that was very limited. If I can compose, play it, and also my palette of sounds were getting much bigger than guitar. I was hearing symphony orchestra and sounds that have never been created before, and I needed these tools. So that was a revelation. But then, I think it was probably the next year at AES, the synclavier was shown. And it sounded so much better. And it was only a synthesizer at that point. It didn't do sampling like the Fairlight did. It was only a synthesizer, yet it sounded so much better to my ear. The quality of the sound was day and night. So I got very interested in this. So I started talking to the company, and one thing led to another. I bought my first synclavier and then just kept building on it as I could. And at that point, I started doing lectures and stuff at like UCLA and Dartmouth College and stuff on digital synthesis. And I just taught myself. I just always keep reading and reading and reading. And then the word got around. Remember, the synclavier was very new, very new at those. This is cutting edge technology. So people started hearing about me. And I got calls from record companies to work with artists, and it just sort of evolved until I ended up working with Michael Jackson, because he had one, but he was going through programmers, and he couldn't really communicate with them. He's coming from a musical point of view, and these guys were like really just technical programmers. So when our paths crossed, he wanted me to teach him. And I thought, well, that's good. I thought maybe I'd make a lot of sounds for him so he could use them on his productions, but he really wanted me to teach him so he could take responsibility for it. And so he had me come over to his house one day and one morning and introduced himself. He sat down and I said, oh, I plugged it in, turned it on. So, okay, now you take this floppy disk and you put it here. And he said, time out. I don't know what a floppy disk is. I went, oh, okay. I found out he barely knows how to work a cassette recorder. So he was a very untechnical guy, but he understood, if you can do this and if you can do that, can you do this? He was very creative this way. So in about 3 hours, I showed him how to turn the machine on, call up, the library of sounds and how he could do that, and call a sound to the keyboard so he could play around with it. And then he said, that's all I can take for today. Can you come back tomorrow for a session? And I was with him every day after that for almost 4 years. Did the Bad album, some of the Dangerous album, a History album, went on the Bad World Tour, and we did things that nobody else had ever done before. I was playing 2 synclaviers live on stage, had one in my hotel room, so if we wanted to write, Michael would come into my room and we could write. So it was a lot of fun. One point, about halfway through the making of the Bad album, there kind of became 2 teams, a team and a kind of B team. It was kind of strange being in the middle of this because they had different points of view. And At one point, I actually thought maybe I might lose my job because it got quite tense because I came to work one day and I found out that Quincy and Bruce and gave Michael an ultimatum that that other team had to go or they would go. It got to like this. And so I thought, you know, I'm probably gone, even though I was working on both sides. Because I worked for Michael. I didn't work for Quincy or anybody else. I was working for Michael. And yep, they were gone. But I remained. So I kept my job. The Bad album, when we first started it, Quincy and Bruce were used to working with techniques from the Thriller, and Bruce's whole history is kind of like recording live jazz bands and live performances and to capture those as they are, not to change them or do anything with them, but to literally capture them. But then with the synclavier, and Michael had been working with it for quite a while at his house, and he was really interested in the new sounds that he could get. So when we brought that in to actually start the Bad album recording at Westlake, because we brought Michael's synclavier, which was huge. We brought it into the Westlake control room, and it was permanently fixed there for a year. So, and then I brought mine from my studio to Michael's house because when we get done during the recording during the day, we'd go back to his house and work on more songs on the machine. So it was like 17 hours a day, 7 days a week for years. Most, I would say probably 80% of the album, Bad album, was synclavier. There was some people that would come in and do sessions, you know, here and there, but Michael always preferred 95% of the time the sound coming out of the synclavier. The synclavier was so hi-fi, and it had so much punch, and he really liked that for his dance. Michael's view of performing live, and different musicians have different views on this. There's two camps. One is play it exactly like you recorded it, and the other is you improvise and expand on the recording live. Michael's view is he wanted to play it exactly like the record. The sounds, everything, because that's what people are familiar with when they listen to the album. Now, maybe some of this is because his range of listeners was huge. From like 85-year-old ladies to like little kids. That's unusual. Most bands have a very specific listening age, but his was so wide, and so he wanted it to be just like this. So the band actually had to get used to this. I mean, I remember Ricky Lawson, we were putting it together on the stage at live rehearsals, and he said, oh, he's had samplers for his drums. He says, oh, I got all these great sounds. And I said, yeah, I'm sure you do, but Michael wants the exact sounds that were used on the album. Oh, and so it was like that. But they adjusted really quickly. So we fused the synclavier together with the live performances, and they were such good musicians, in the Bad tour. They're really, really good. I played 2 synclaviers live, and with a direct-to-disc system. I mean, it had everything. On stage, there's 2 keyboards and all the monitors here, but backstage is where all the computer power was, and it was just towers and towers and towers of synthesizer cards and big racks of disk drives and a 5-ton air conditioner to keep them cool. And after that, I started doing a lot of work in Japan, and I did a lot of work with 3D sound, my own. I actually built my own processing system back then, and it was only 4 channels, but it did sound really, really good. And what I was using for room simulators was the Quantec XL room simulators. I had 6 of them. They're like $10,000 a piece, but they sounded awesome. And that's what I was using for the room simulation. And I had software that I could control all of them to just change the rooms. And I had that many so that I could create walls, virtual walls. So it was pretty cool. But now I can do 250 tracks on a Mac. My focus has always mostly been on the real intimate virtual realities, where I'm trying to synthesize the environment literally real, where you can't tell the difference. I've just always been just interested in creating new experiences because it's fun to see what happens, And when we're doing sound or visuals, create using these tools to create different effects, the only tool that we have in comparison to know how good our tools are our own perceptions. So there's probably a limit, at some point of where technology doesn't really, the quality of it ceases to make any difference because our human system can't perceive it. I've tried to go actually beyond this into the more esoteric realms of the spiritual nature of human beings, and that's a whole different thing, because from that point of view, maybe there isn't any limit. You don't have to be in that traditional spot, like that we're used to when we go to a live concert. We can be where the conductor is, we can be on the drum throne with the drummer, or we can be on the ceiling, we can fly around. But what's the purpose of this, right? And the purpose, as I said, is just to have fun and see what happens. And in the big picture, why I ultimately do this is just because I like to help people have good experiences in life. I think that's one of the reasons why Michael and I hit it off really well, because that was kind of his goal too. It was very simple, actually. It's just to make people happy and lift them up. And really, it's just that simple. What I would like the students to understand is that these tools that we use are just tools. Whether it's a 3D audio application or the microphones or the speakers and, all these different things, the processing power, that we're trying to do with creating virtual environments and these kinds of things. But they're tools to do what? What are we going to do with these tools? The tools are there for that. That's the senior purpose. I want to create this vision or something. What tools do I need to do that? In my case, a lot of the tools weren't developed and still aren't, and I have to work and try to develop those myself. But that's fun. So I just want the students to keep in mind that today's talk is not so much about the tools themselves, although I have to reference those, but it's the production techniques that they can use to get their vision more inspired and accurate.